The elevators are full at 9 in the morning. Insurance workers stream into downtown Hartford from West Hartford, from Farmington, from Glastonbury. They park in surface lots that stretch for blocks in every direction. They badge into glass towers. They ride to their floors. They sit at their desks. At 5 in the afternoon, the process reverses. The elevators empty, the parking lots drain, the streets go quiet. By 6, downtown Hartford is a ghost town. Walk the streets at dusk and count the souls you pass. A security guard smoking outside a lobby. A homeless man beneath an awning. The wind. This is not a city that was abandoned. The buildings still stand. The Capitol dome still gleams gold against the Connecticut sky. Workers still commute here, 120,000 strong, every single weekday. But they do not stay. They do not live here. They do not eat dinner here or walk their dogs here or fall in love here. They pass through. Hartford, Connecticut is a city you drive through on your way to somewhere else. And if you have ever merged from Interstate 84 onto Interstate 91, if you have ever navigated that tangle of concrete ramps and sound barriers they call the Mixmaster, you have driven through the corpse of what was once the richest city in America. Look out your window as you pass. Look at the Connecticut River flowing south toward Long Island Sound. Look at how far away it seems from the office towers, how disconnected, how irrelevant. That river made Hartford possible. That river made Hartford rich. And Hartford thanked the river by building a highway between them, a wall of asphalt and exhaust that severed the city from the water that gave it life. There is a teenager named Mills who grew up in Hartford. He crossed that river 1,000 times on his way to Manchester. One day, he looked out the car window and asked himself a question. Wait, where am I? He did not know his city was on a river. That is what Hartford has become. A place where children do not know they live beside water. A place where the streets empty at sunset. A place where parking lots outnumber parks. Where concrete canyons swallow footsteps. Where the loudest sound after dark is the hum of highway traffic carrying people somewhere else. In 1876, a journalist named Charles Clark visited Hartford and did the arithmetic. He counted the assets of just 2 insurance companies, Hartford Fire and Aetna, and found they held more than $113 million. He surveyed the mansions on Farmington Avenue, the factories along the river, the publishers and precision manufacturers and literary giants who had made this bend in the Connecticut River their home. He wrote one sentence that would haunt this city for a century and a half. Hartford is the richest city in the United States, per capita, per person. More concentrated wealth than New York or Boston or Philadelphia. More millionaires per block than anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere. Mark Twain lived here. He built a 25-room mansion with interiors designed by Louis Comfort Tiffany. He wrote Tom Sawyer in that house. He wrote Huckleberry Finn. He wrote A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. And when visitors asked him about his home, he said, "Of all the beautiful towns it has been my fortune to see, this is the chief. You do not know what beauty is if you have not been here." Harriet Beecher Stowe lived next door. The woman who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, the book Abraham Lincoln supposedly credited with starting the Civil War. She tended her garden and received visitors and watched the insurance money flow like water through the streets of her adopted city. That was 1876. 140 years later, Hartford ranked among the 10 poorest cities in America. 3 of every 10 families lived below the poverty line. The population had crashed by 40%. The department stores had closed. The hockey team had fled to North Carolina. The literary giants were long dead, and their houses were museums visited by tourists who learned that Twain called Hartford the chief of beautiful towns, but did not learn what Hartford did to itself in the decades after he left. This is not a story about economic collapse. This is not a story about a factory closing, or a mine running dry, or a plague sweeping through. Hartford did not die of natural causes. Hartford committed suicide. The men who killed it were not villains. They were not corrupt. They were not stupid. They were the most successful businessmen in America. the executives of the most profitable industry in the nation, men who had built their fortunes on a single principle: keeping their promises. They believed they were saving their city. They believed in progress. They believed that highways and parking lots and urban renewal would revitalize Hartford, would make it modern, would carry it into a gleaming future of glass towers and suburban prosperity. They were wrong, and by the time they realized they were wrong, it was too late. The neighborhoods were gone. The highways were poured. The river was walled off. The people had fled. This is the story of how the richest city in America destroyed itself in the name of the automobile. This is the story of how insurance executives who had built empires on keeping their promises broke the most important promise of all: the promise that a city makes to its people. This is the story of Hartford. 1636. A bend in the Connecticut River, wide and slow, cutting through marshland. Reverend Thomas Hooker leads 100 Puritan settlers south from Massachusetts Bay Colony. They are looking for fertile land and freedom from the rigid theocracy of Boston. They find both at a place the Dutch have already claimed, a trading post called Fort Go-de-Hoop, the House of Hope. Hooker calls his settlement Newtown, then Hartford, after Hartford in England. The name does not matter. What matters is the geography. The Connecticut River is the longest river in New England. It rises near the Canadian border and flows 390 miles to Long Island Sound. For most of that distance, it is navigable only by small craft. But here, at this bend, something changes. Ocean-going ships can sail no further inland. The river narrows, the current quickens. The draft becomes too shallow for heavy cargo. Hartford sits at the head of navigation. This is not a coincidence. This is destiny written in water. Everything traveling between the Atlantic coast and the interior of New England must pass through Hartford. Furs from the north, timber from the forests, grain from the farms, manufactured goods heading upriver, raw materials heading down. Hartford is a choke point, a bottleneck, a toll booth built by God himself. The city exists because of this accident of hydrology. And for 200 years, this accident makes Hartford rich. But there is a problem with Hartford. The same river that makes the city possible also threatens to destroy it. The Connecticut River floods. It floods regularly, catastrophically, inevitably. The meadows south of downtown, the flats along the water, the low-lying land where smart men would never build. This land floods every spring when the snowmelt comes roaring down from Vermont and New Hampshire and Massachusetts. The water rises. The streets become canals. The basements fill. The warehouses drown. Hartford is a city that should not exist. It is built on a flood plain, at the mercy of a river that has no mercy. Every generation learns this lesson. Every generation rebuilds. The settlers who follow Hooker are not deterred. They build their warehouses close to the water because that is where the ships dock. They build their homes close to the warehouses because that is where the work is. They watch the river rise and fall. They pump out their basements. They dry their goods. They keep building. By 1790, Hartford is a prosperous trading town. Merchants grow wealthy moving cargo up and down the river. Ship captains build fine houses on the hills above the floodplain. A commercial class emerges, men with capital to invest and appetites for risk. One of these men is Jeremiah Wadsworth, and he has noticed something about his city. Hartford burns. Not catastrophically, not all at once, but constantly, inevitably, predictably. The Connecticut River Valley is timber country. The warehouses are made of wood. The houses are made of wood. The ships are made of wood. Everything is made of wood, and wood burns. A spark from a chimney. A candle left unattended. A lightning strike. The fire starts small and spreads fast, jumping from building to building, consuming everything in its path until it runs out of fuel, or hits the river, or simply burns itself out. The merchants of Hartford live in terror of fire. They form bucket brigades. They build cisterns. They pray. But they cannot stop the flames. Wadsworth has an idea. What if the merchants of Hartford pooled their resources? What if they collected premiums from each other, built a reserve of capital, and used that capital to pay for rebuilding when the fires came? What if they spread the risk across the entire merchant class, so that no single fire could destroy any single man? This is not a new idea. Fire insurance has existed in London since the Great Fire of 1666. Benjamin Franklin organized a fire insurance company in Philadelphia in 1752, but no one has tried it in Hartford. In 1810, a group of 12 men gather in a counting house on Main Street. They pool $15,000. They draft a charter. They apply to the state legislature for permission to operate as a publicly owned company. The Hartford Fire Insurance Company is born. The premise is simple. Merchants pay premiums. The company invests those premiums. When a fire strikes, the company pays to rebuild. The premiums must exceed the losses, or the company fails. The investments must grow faster than the claims, or the company fails. Everything depends on mathematics, on actuarial tables, on the cold calculation of risk. The men who run Hartford Fire Insurance Company are not gamblers. They are accountants. They study fire patterns. They map neighborhoods by building material, by proximity to water, by access for fire brigades. They charge higher premiums for wooden buildings than for brick. They charge higher premiums for warehouses full of flammable goods than for homes full of furniture. They are scientists of catastrophe, and their science makes them money. For 25 years, Hartford Fire Insurance Company grows. It insures merchants in Hartford, then merchants in New Haven, then merchants across Connecticut, then merchants across New England. It pays its claims. It maintains its reserves. It builds a reputation for solvency and honesty. And then comes the night that makes Hartford the insurance capital of the world. December 16th, 1835. Manhattan's financial district. A gas main ruptures. A spark ignites. The temperature is 17 degrees below zero. The water in the fire hydrants is frozen solid. For 2 days, the fire burns. 50 acres of lower Manhattan are consumed. 700 buildings destroyed. $20 million in property, nearly $600 million in modern currency, reduced to ash and rubble. And then the insurance claims begin. 26 fire insurance companies operate in New York City in December of 1835. Within weeks, 23 of them are bankrupt. They cannot pay. They do not have the reserves. They have collected premiums and paid dividends and assumed the good times would last forever. They assumed wrong. But 3 companies survive. 3 companies have the capital, the reserves, the cold mathematical discipline to honor their commitments. One of them is Hartford Fire Insurance Company. Its president is a man named Eliphalet Terry, and he understands something that his bankrupt competitors do not. Insurance is not about collecting premiums. Insurance is about paying claims. The entire business model depends on one thing and one thing only: keeping your promises. While the ashes of Manhattan are still warm, Terry boards a coach to New York. He walks through the devastation. He meets with policyholders. He carries a simple message: Hartford pays. Other companies are making excuses. Other companies are hiding behind fine print and legal technicalities. Other companies are telling their customers to sue. Hartford writes checks. Within 1 year, the Hartford Fire Insurance Company has doubled its business. Within 5 years, it has become the largest fire insurance company in the United States. Within a decade, Hartford itself has become synonymous with insurance, the one place in America where a merchant can be certain his policy will be honored when disaster strikes. The model spreads. Other insurance companies spring up in Hartford, each built on the same foundation of mathematical conservatism and ruthless honesty. Aetna, Phoenix, Travelers, Connecticut Mutual. One by one, they establish headquarters in this small city on the Connecticut River, and one by one, they grow rich. The insurance men of Hartford are not flashy. They do not build gaudy mansions or throw lavish parties. They wear dark suits. They attend congregational churches. They invest their profits conservatively. They pay their claims. They call themselves the bishops, not because they are holy, because they are careful, because they understand that their entire industry depends on trust, and trust is built slowly and destroyed quickly. One failure to pay, one breach of faith, one broken promise, and the whole edifice collapses. The bishops of Hartford build their fortunes on keeping their word. Remember that. 1848. A man named Samuel Colt returns to Hartford with a contract from the United States Army. Colt is not from Hartford. He was born in the city, yes, but he left as a young man and has spent the years since failing at business after business. He invented a revolver, a handgun with a rotating cylinder that could fire 5 shots without reloading, and he patented it in 1836. But no one wanted to buy it. The Army rejected it. His first factory in Paterson, New Jersey, went bankrupt. Now the Army wants revolvers. Captain Samuel Walker is fighting in the Mexican War, and he has seen what Colt's invention can do in the hands of Texas Rangers. He places an order for 1,000 pistols. Colt comes home to Hartford to fill the order. He has no factory. He has no workers. He has no money except the Army's advance payment. What he has is an idea about how to manufacture things that will change the world. The traditional way to make a gun is to employ craftsmen. Each craftsman makes each part by hand, filing and fitting until the pieces work together. Each gun is unique. Each requires hours of skilled labor. If a part breaks, a craftsman must make a new one to match. Colt has a different vision. He wants to make guns from interchangeable parts. He wants machines that stamp out trigger guards and cylinders and barrels, each one identical to the last, so precise that any part from any gun can be swapped with any part from any other gun. This has never been done before. Not truly. Not at scale. Colt hires the best machinists in New England. He designs custom machinery. He invents jigs and fixtures and gauges that ensure every part meets specifications down to the 1,000th of an inch. He obsesses over precision. In 1851, Colt travels to London for the Great Exhibition at the Crystal Palace. He brings 10 revolvers. He disassembles them completely, mixing all the parts together in a pile on the table. Then he reassembles 10 working revolvers from the jumbled pieces. The British engineers are astonished. They have never seen anything like it. They call it the American system of manufacturing. Colt returns to Hartford a celebrity. He buys 250 acres of flood-prone land in the South Meadows, land that smart investors have avoided because the river rises there every spring. He builds a 2-mile dike to hold back the water. He plants willow trees along the banks to stabilize the soil. And then he builds the largest private armory in the world. The Colt Armory rises 5 stories above the Connecticut River, a massive H-shaped factory crowned with a blue onion dome and a golden rampant Colt. The dome is visible for miles. It becomes Hartford's signature silhouette, the image that appears on postcards and letterheads, the symbol of a city that makes things. Inside the armory, 1,500 workers operate hundreds of specialized machines. The noise is deafening. The precision is extraordinary. Colt produces 500 revolvers per day, each one identical to the last, each one capable of being repaired with parts from any other. But Colt is not just making guns, he is making machinists. The young men who learn their trade at Colt Armory go on to found their own factories. They spread the American system of manufacturing across New England and then across the nation. The Connecticut River Valley becomes a corridor of precision manufacturing, a network of machine shops and tool makers and weapons factories that stretches from Springfield to New Haven. Pratt and Whitney, Smith and Wesson, the Springfield Armory. These companies trace their DNA back to Hartford, back to Colt, back to the radical idea that machines can make identical parts by the thousand. Hartford is no longer just an insurance town. Hartford is an arsenal. Samuel Colt dies in 1862, the richest man in Connecticut. His widow Elizabeth takes over the company. She runs it through the Civil War, through the Indian Wars, through the mechanization of the American West. The Blue Dome becomes a symbol of American firepower, and the money flows into Hartford like water. The insurance companies grow. the manufacturers grow, and the city grows with them. By 1876, Hartford has transformed. The population has climbed past 40,000. The streets are paved with stone. Gas lamps light the downtown at night. Horse-drawn trolleys carry workers from their homes to their offices. The Connecticut State Capitol, a Gothic revival masterpiece of marble and granite, rises on a hill overlooking Bushnell Park. Bushnell Park itself is a monument to civic ambition. It is the first public park in America, paid for by public funds, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, the same man who designed Central Park in New York. The citizens of Hartford taxed themselves to create a green oasis in the heart of their city, a place where rich and poor could walk among the trees and flowers without charge. This is Hartford at its peak. This is the city that Charles Clark visits when he writes his famous arithmetic in Scribner's Monthly. This is the richest city in America. And on Farmington Avenue, west of downtown, something extraordinary is happening. They call it Nook Farm. 140 wooded acres, a rural enclave within walking distance of the capital. Writers and reformers and intellectuals have gathered here, drawn by the combination of money and culture that Hartford offers. They buy adjacent properties. They build ambitious houses. They form a community unlike anything else in America. The center of this community is a 25-room Victorian mansion that looks like a steamboat crashed into a haunted house. Red brick and decorative trim, and a wraparound porch that seems to spiral in impossible directions. Inside, Louis Comfort Tiffany has designed the interiors: stenciled walls, carved woodwork, silver leaf on the ceilings. This is the home of Samuel Langhorne Clemens, known to the world as Mark Twain. Twain moved to Hartford. In 1871, drawn by the money, his publisher was here and stayed for the culture. He has found his tribe. His neighbors include Harriet Beecher Stowe, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, still the most famous woman in America, 12 years after the book that some say started the Civil War. She tends her garden. She writes. She remembers the brother who died young and the faith that sustains her. Isabella Beecher Hooker, Harriet's half-sister, who fights for women's suffrage with the same passion her sister brought to abolition. She invites Susan B. Anthony to stay at her home. She testifies before Congress. She believes the vote will come in her lifetime. Charles Dudley Warner, editor of the Hartford Courant, who co-writes a novel with Twain called The Gilded Age. The title becomes a label for an era. Every Friday evening, the neighbors gather in Twain's billiard room. They play pool. They drink whiskey. They argue about politics and literature and the future of the Republic. President Ulysses S. Grant visits. William Dean Howells, editor of the Atlantic Monthly, considers Hartford an essential stop on any East Coast tour. This is Hartford's golden age. This is the city that Twain loves, the city he celebrates as the chief of beautiful towns. Insurance money funds literary ambitions. Manufacturing precision enables artistic expression. The Connecticut River carries wealth from all directions, and that wealth settles here, in this improbable bend in the waterway, where Puritans once built a trading post and their descendants built an empire. 24 book publishers operate in Hartford. The precision manufacturing base attracts inventors and engineers. The insurance companies generate capital that seeks new investments. The culture attracts talent, and the talent attracts more talent, a virtuous cycle of creativity and commerce that makes Hartford unique among American cities. The future seems limitless. Mark Twain believes this. He invests his book, royalties in a typesetting machine that will revolutionize publishing. He expands his house. He throws parties. He believes Hartford will only grow richer, only grow more beautiful, only climb higher into the stratosphere of American achievement. He is wrong about the typesetting machine. It bankrupts him. He leaves Hartford in 1891, fleeing creditors, never to live here again. But he is also wrong about Hartford. The city he loves is preparing to destroy itself. The forces that will tear Hartford apart are already gathering in the 1890s, invisible to Twain and his neighbors, invisible to the insurance executives and the factory owners, and the politicians who believe their prosperity is permanent. The automobile is coming. In 1893, the Duryea brothers built the first American gasoline-powered car in Springfield, 40 miles north of Hartford. The machine is a curiosity, a toy for the wealthy, a novelty that will never replace the horse. Within 40 years, the automobile will remake every American city. Within 60 years, it will remake Hartford beyond recognition. But in 1876, no one can see this. No one can imagine a city built around cars instead of people. No one can imagine highways carving through neighborhoods, parking lots replacing parks, rivers walled off behind concrete barriers. In 1876, Hartford is beautiful and wealthy and confident and utterly unprepared for what is coming. The golden age has reached its peak. The question that should haunt every resident, every businessman, every insurance executive counting his money: what could possibly go wrong? The answer arrives slowly, then all at once. The first 2 decades of the 20th century bring changes that seem, at first, like progress. The population climbs toward 100,000. Electric trolleys replace horse-drawn cars. Telephone lines crisscross the sky. The insurance companies build larger headquarters. The factories expand. But beneath the prosperity, something is shifting. The automobile begins as a luxury. In 1900, there are 8,000 registered cars in the entire United States. By 1910, there are nearly 500,000. By 1920, there are 8 million. The rich buy cars first. They drive them on Sundays for pleasure, on roads built for horses. They park them in converted carriage houses. They consider themselves modern, progressive, liberated from the limitations of rail schedules and trolley routes. The middle class follows. By the 1920s, Henry Ford has perfected assembly line production, a direct descendant of Samuel Colt's American system, and the Model T costs less than $300. A factory worker can afford a car. A clerk can afford a car. A school teacher can afford a car. And once everyone has a car, everything changes. The trolley lines, those networks of electrified rails that carried Hartford's workers from home to factory to office, begin to decline. Why wait for a trolley in the rain when you can drive your own vehicle? Why squeeze into a crowded car with strangers when you can ride in privacy and comfort? The streetcar companies slash schedules. They defer maintenance. They raise fares. Ridership drops further. The cycle feeds on itself. But the trolleys are only the beginning. The automobile creates a new kind of freedom. Freedom from the city itself. Before the car, you lived where you could walk to work. Your neighborhood was your world. The butcher, the baker, the grocer, the church, the school, everything you needed was within walking distance, or at most, a trolley ride away. The automobile abolishes distance. Now you can live 5 miles from work, 10 miles, 15. You can live in a house with a yard, a garage, space for your children to play. You can live somewhere quiet, somewhere green, somewhere the air does not smell of factory smoke. The suburbs cool. West Hartford, Farmington, Glastonbury, Wethersfield. Towns that were once farming villages, accessible only by long carriage rides, are now 20 minutes away by car. Developers buy farmland and subdivide it into lots. They build single-family homes with front lawns and backyards. They promise the American dream: property, space, freedom. Who answers this call? The people who can afford to leave. The insurance executives buy houses in West Hartford. The factory managers buy houses in Farmington. The professionals, the merchants, the upper middle class, anyone with enough money for a car and a down payment, they buy houses in the suburbs and drive into Hartford for work. This is not yet a crisis. In the 1920s, Hartford is still a thriving city. The population continues to grow. The factories hum. The insurance companies post record profits. But look closer at who is arriving and who is leaving. The people leaving are white, middle-class, native-born. They take their tax dollars with them. They take their spending with them. They take their children out of Hartford's public schools and enroll them in suburban districts. The people arriving are different. They come from other places, from the American South during the Great Migration, from Puerto Rico after the island becomes a U.S. territory, from Europe through Ellis Island. They come because Hartford has jobs. They come because Hartford has housing they can afford. They come because they have no choice. The Homeowners Loan Corporation, a federal agency created in the 1930s, sends assessors to Hartford. They draw maps. They color-code neighborhoods. Green for the best, blue for still desirable, yellow for declining, red for hazardous. The red neighborhoods, the ones where no bank will write a mortgage, the ones where property values can only fall, are the neighborhoods where black families live, where Puerto Rican families live, where immigrants live. This is called redlining. It is not a natural phenomenon. It is a choice made by bankers and bureaucrats and real estate agents, a choice that will shape Hartford for generations. The people trapped in red neighborhoods cannot build wealth. They cannot buy homes that appreciate in value. They cannot borrow money to start businesses. They are locked in place while their white neighbors drive away to the suburbs. And still, Hartford grows. The census of 1950 shows the city's population at 177,000, the highest it will ever reach. World War II has been good for Hartford. Colt makes firearms. Pratt & Whitney makes aircraft engines. Electric Boat, down the coast in Groton, makes submarines. The arsenal of democracy runs on Connecticut River Valley precision. 1950. The peak. The city is dense, walkable, diverse. Irish families crowd the East Side. Italian families dominate Front Street, which they call Little Italy. Black families settle in the North End. Puerto Rican families arrive to work in the factories. Front Street. Remember this street. It runs along the Connecticut River, through the oldest part of Hartford. Italian immigrants have made it their own since the 1890s. The pushcart vendors sell vegetables and bread. The butcher shops hang sausages in the windows. The bakeries fill the air with the smell of fresh loaves. 187 families live on Front Street in 1950. 108 businesses, churches, social clubs, a neighborhood that works. The residents do not own their buildings. They rent. The landlords are corporations and investors who see Front Street as valuable real estate with disappointing returns. The buildings are old. The rents are low. The property taxes are minimal. The insurance executives drive past Front Street on their way to work. They see the pushcarts and the clotheslines and the children playing in the streets. They see something their actuarial tables can measure. A neighborhood that generates only $90,000 per year in property taxes on $3 million of assessed value. They see blight. They see an opportunity. What they do not see are the 187 families who will be displaced, the 108 businesses that will be destroyed, the community that will be erased. But that erasure is coming. In 1949, the United States Congress passes the Housing Act, which creates a program called urban renewal. The premise is simple. The federal government will pay cities to clear slums and blight, demolishing old neighborhoods and replacing them with modern developments. The language is neutral. The targets are not. In 1949, a man named Robert Moses writes a document called the Arterial Plan for Hartford. Moses is the most powerful urban planner in America. He has built highways and bridges and parks across New York City. He has demolished neighborhoods in the Bronx to make way for the Cross-Bronx Expressway. He has a philosophy about cities and slums and progress. It would be a shame, he says, if you didn't do some slum clearance while building the highway. 4 of the 5 entities that commission the Arterial Plan for Hartford are insurance companies: Aetna Life, Connecticut General, the Phoenix Mutual. The bishops have a plan for their city. They will build highways. They will clear slums. They will replace the organic chaos of human life with the sterile geometry of modern planning. They will make Hartford a city designed for automobiles, a city their employees can drive into every morning and drive out of every evening, a city of glass towers and parking lots and elevated interchanges. They believe they are saving Hartford. They are about to destroy it. But that destruction belongs to the next chapter. For now, in 1950, Hartford stands at its peak. 177,000 souls, factories humming, insurance towers rising, the richest per capita heritage in America still visible in the Victorian mansions and the gilded Capitol Dome. Mark Twain's house still stands on Farmington Avenue, a museum now, visited by tourists who learn that Twain loved Hartford, but not why he left. The blue onion dome of the Colt Armory still rises over the South Meadows, a symbol of manufacturing might that will soon become a symbol of manufacturing's decline. And on Front Street, in Little Italy, the Italian families go about their lives. They do not know that their neighborhood has been targeted. They do not know that men in suits have looked at their homes and seen only tax revenue, only assessed value, only blight. They do not know that the bulldozers are coming. Hartford's golden age is over. The age of highways is about to begin. 1958, a cold morning in early spring. Mayor James H. Kinsella stands on Front Street holding a brick. Behind him, photographers ready their cameras. City officials cluster in overcoats. Insurance executives watch from black sedans. The buildings of Little Italy rise around them, 3-story tenements with fire escapes, storefronts with awnings faded by decades of Connecticut sun, windows where faces have gathered to watch what is about to happen. The building in front of the mayor has been condemned. Its residents have been relocated. Its windows are dark. Kinsella winds up. He throws the brick. Glass shatters. The cameras flash. The mayor grins. The demolition of Front Street has officially begun. Within months, the bulldozers arrive. They do not discriminate between the abandoned buildings and the occupied ones, between the businesses that have closed and the businesses still struggling to survive. Block by block, building by building, they reduce Little Italy to rubble. 187 families, 108 businesses, 12 acres of neighborhood erased. The Italian families scatter. Some move to the North End, some move to the South End. Some leave Hartford entirely, following the exodus to the suburbs that has already claimed so many of their neighbors. The community that took 60 years to build disappears in 18 months. The pushcart vendors find new corners. The bakeries relocate or close. The social clubs dissolve. The churches lose their congregations. And in the place where Little Italy once stood, a new vision rises from the rubble. They call it Constitution Plaza. Imagine the architectural drawings. Imagine the scale models displayed in insurance company boardrooms. Imagine the renderings published in newspapers and magazines, promising Hartford a glimpse of the city of tomorrow. Glass towers rising from granite plazas. Elevated walkways connecting building to building, separating pedestrians from automobiles. Open spaces with fountains and sculptures. A broadcast center for the local television station. A hotel for visiting businessmen. Office space for 10,000 workers. This is not urban renewal. This is urban replacement. The organic chaos of an immigrant neighborhood, the narrow streets, the crowded storefronts, the life lived on sidewalks and stoops, is being replaced with something clean, something modern, something designed. The architects are not fools. They have studied Le Corbusier. They have read the manifestos of modernism. They believe that cities can be planned, that human behavior can be directed through design, that the problems of the old city, the congestion, the noise, the poverty, can be solved with enough concrete and enough vision. They believe they are building the future. Constitution Plaza opens in stages between 1962 and 1964. The insurance companies move in. Phoenix Mutual occupies its signature building, a green glass ellipse that looks like a boat balanced on its stern. Broadcast House rises with its distinctive curved facade. The plaza spreads between them, acres of granite paving interrupted by planters and benches and abstract sculptures. The Critics arrive. April 1965. Alan Temko, the architectural critic for the San Francisco Chronicle, tours Constitution Plaza. He has won a Pulitzer Prize. His opinions carry weight. He calls it a butchered opportunity. He has unkind words for the highway engineers who built freeways between the city and river and are now making inroads into Bushnell Park, wrecking what the past gave you for free. Temko sees what the boosters cannot see. Constitution Plaza is not a neighborhood. It is a corporate campus. It has no houses. It has no grocery stores. It has no bars or restaurants where workers might linger after 5 o'clock. It is a place designed for working, not for living. The people who work here arrive in the morning and leave in the evening. They do not become residents. They do not become citizens. They do not invest their lives in this place. They commute. But the critics are easy to dismiss. The buildings are full. The tax revenue is flowing. The insurance. Companies are satisfied. Constitution Plaza is declared a success. And besides, Constitution Plaza is only the beginning. The real transformation of Hartford is happening elsewhere, on the drawing boards of highway engineers, in the corridors of the State Transportation Department, in Washington, where the money flows. 1956. President Dwight Eisenhower signs the National Interstate and Defense Highways Act. The federal government will pay 90% of the cost of building a national highway network. The official justification is national defense, roads that can move troops, evacuate cities in case of nuclear attack. But the real purpose is economic. Americans want to drive. The automobile industry wants them to drive. The oil industry wants them to drive. The suburban developers want them to drive. And now, the federal government will build the roads. 41,000 miles of interstate highway, paid for with federal dollars, carved through cities and across farmland and over mountains, the largest public works project in human history. Hartford will get 2 interstates. Interstate 84, running east-west, connecting Hartford to Waterbury and Danbury, and eventually to Pennsylvania. Interstate 91, running north-south along the Connecticut River Valley, connecting Hartford to Springfield and New Haven and New York. The routes must be chosen. The land must be acquired. The neighborhoods must be cleared. Robert Moses's arterial plan becomes the template. The highways will not skirt the city. They will cut through it. Consider the logic. The insurance executives who commissioned the arterial plan live in the suburbs. They drive to work. They want to drive to work quickly, efficiently, without stopping for traffic lights or waiting for pedestrians. They want highways that deliver them from their driveways to their parking garages with minimum friction. Where should these highways go? Not through the wealthy neighborhoods. Not through West Hartford, where the executives live. Not through Farmington, where the country clubs are. Not through the suburbs at all. Through the city. Through the neighborhoods where poor people live. Through the neighborhoods that have been redlined, that generate minimal tax revenue, that house the populations the planners consider expendable. This is not spoken aloud. This is not written in the planning documents. But it is understood. The highways will clear the slums. The highways will remove the blight. The highways will accomplish what urban renewal has begun, the systematic destruction of poor neighborhoods in the name of progress. Interstate 91 comes first. The route runs along the Connecticut River, between downtown Hartford and the water that made the city possible. Think about this for a moment. Hartford exists because of the Connecticut River. The river is the reason anyone settled here. The river carried the trade that made the merchants rich. The river powered the factories. The river defined the city's identity for 300 years. And now the planners propose to build a wall between Hartford and its river. Not a physical wall, not brick and mortar, but a wall of concrete and asphalt, 6 lanes wide, carrying 40,000 vehicles per day, generating noise and exhaust and danger. A wall that cannot be crossed on foot, except at designated overpasses. A wall that severs downtown from the waterfront as completely as if the planners had filled in the river itself. The planners do not see a wall. They see efficiency. They see traffic flow. They see a highway that will carry commuters from the northern suburbs to the insurance towers without the inconvenience of surface streets. The objections are minimal. Who speaks for the river? Who speaks for the connection between a city and its water? No one with power. No one who matters. Interstate 91 opens in 1966. Downtown Hartford is now cut off from the Connecticut River. To reach the water from Main Street, you must cross a highway. You must navigate ramps and underpasses and pedestrian bridges. You must want to reach the water badly enough to overcome every obstacle the highway engineers have placed in your path. Most people do not want it that badly. Most people forget the river is there. A teenager named Mills grows up in Hartford in the 1980s. He crosses the Connecticut River hundreds of times, riding in cars on Interstate 91 or Route 2, heading to Manchester or East Hartford or points beyond. One day he looks out the window and realizes he does not know where he is. Wait, where am I? He has lived his entire life in a city on a river. He did not know the river existed. Interstate 91 is only half the wound. Interstate 84 comes next, and Interstate 84 aims for the heart. The route runs east-west through Hartford, connecting the city to Waterbury and the western suburbs. The planners consider several alignments. One option would take the highway through Bushnell Park, the nation's first publicly funded park, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, the green heart of downtown Hartford. They reject this option. Not because they value the park, they nearly destroy it anyway, but because the park is visible, beloved, defended. The citizens of Hartford might object. Instead, they choose a route through neighborhoods, through the North End, through areas that have been redlined, areas where black families and Puerto Rican families have been concentrated by decades of housing discrimination, areas where the residents have no political power, no lawyers, no connections to the men who make decisions. Hartford Public High School stands in the path of Interstate 84. The building is a Victorian masterpiece, a monument to public education, a symbol of Hartford's belief that every child deserves access to learning. Generations of Hartford students have passed through its doors. It is irreplaceable. It is also in the way. The bulldozers arrive. The building falls. The rubble is carted away. An off-ramp rises in its place. Hartford's children now attend a brutalist concrete box built in the 1960s. They look out their classroom windows at the highway that replaced their heritage. The two interstates meet at the edge of downtown in an interchange the locals call the Mixmaster. The ramps and overpasses occupy an area the size of downtown itself, acres of concrete connecting roads to roads, carrying vehicles from one highway to another, a monument to the automobile that dominates the landscape like a medieval cathedral once dominated a European town. Stand at the base of the Mixmaster and look up. Concrete ribbons arc overhead. The roar of traffic is constant. The exhaust fumes drift down. This is the heart of Hartford now. This is what the city has placed at its center. The old Front Street neighborhood is gone. Constitution Plaza gleams with glass and granite. The highways carry commuters in and out with brutal efficiency. The insurance executives have gotten exactly what they wanted, and Hartford has begun to die. The death is not immediate. The death is not obvious. The death happens slowly, statistically, in census figures and tax receipts and school enrollment numbers. 1960. 53% of Hartford commuters travel by automobile. 16% walk or bicycle to work. The remainder take buses or trolleys. 1970. The automobile share climbs. The walking share falls. 1980. The trend accelerates. 2000. 74% of Hartford commuters travel by automobile. 6% walk or bicycle. The trolleys are long gone. The buses run on reduced schedules. Hartford has been redesigned for cars. The people who do not have cars, the poor, the elderly, the young, are stranded. They cannot reach jobs in the suburbs. They cannot shop at the malls that have replaced downtown department stores. They are prisoners in a city that no longer wants them. The people who do have cars use them to leave. 1950, population 177,000. The peak, 1960, population 162,000, 15,000 gone. 1970, population 158,000. The decline continues, but the numbers tell only part of the story. The people leaving are not a random sample of Hartford's population. They are the people with choices. They are white. They are middle class. They are the families with children, the taxpayers, the consumers, the citizens who vote and volunteer and invest in their communities. They are moving to West Hartford, to Farmington, to Glastonbury, to Simsbury and Avon and Granby. They are buying houses with yards. They are enrolling their children in suburban schools. They are shopping at suburban malls. They are paying suburban property taxes. Hartford still has their jobs. The insurance companies remain downtown. The workers commute in every morning, park in the lots that have replaced neighborhoods, ride the elevators to their offices. But their money no longer circulates in Hartford. Their children no longer attend Hartford schools. Their votes no longer determine Hartford's future. They have become visitors in the city that employs them. The people remaining are the people without choices. The black families who cannot buy houses in the suburbs because banks will not write them mortgages. The Puerto Rican families who face discrimination everywhere they turn. The poor, the elderly, the disabled. The people trapped by poverty and racism in neighborhoods that the city has written off. Constitution Plaza is supposed to fix this. Urban renewal is supposed to fix this. The theory is simple. Clear the slums, build modern developments, attract middle-class residents back to the city. Replace the people who generate costs with people who generate revenue. It does not work. Constitution Plaza generates tax revenue. Constitution Plaza keeps insurance jobs in the city. Constitution Plaza fills its buildings with workers. But Constitution Plaza does not bring residents. Constitution Plaza does not bring life. Constitution Plaza empties at 5 o'clock and stays empty until 9 the next morning. 1975. City planners finally admit the truth. Constitution Plaza, they write, succeeded in keeping jobs in the city and in generating tax revenue, but has failed in making downtown a lively place. Failed in making downtown a lively place. This is bureaucratic language for a simple reality. They demolished a neighborhood where people lived and built a plaza where no one lives. They traded community for commerce. They won the battle and lost the war. And the damage spreads. Boyd Hines directs an organization called Sand Enterprises. He works in Hartford's North End. He watches the neighborhood struggle with overcrowding, with poverty, with all the pathologies that concentrate when poor people are squeezed into shrinking spaces. In October 1984, during a public forum, he traces the connections. Constitution Plaza started a ripple effect, he says, that led to many of the problems in Hartford's North End. When the plaza went up, the blacks in the area were squashed and squeezed into the North End. This is the causal chain. Urban renewal displaces families. The displaced families must go somewhere. Banks will not write mortgages for black families in white neighborhoods. The displaced families crowd into the North End, the one area where they are permitted to live. The North End, already poor, becomes poorer. The housing stock, already strained, deteriorates. The schools, already underfunded, decline further. Crime rises, businesses leave, the tax base shrinks, and the white families who might have stayed in Hartford, the ones wavering on the edge, considering the suburbs but not yet committed, they see the North End, and they make their decision. They pack their belongings. They cross the city line. They do not come back. This is white flight. This is the engine of Hartford's destruction. Not the highways alone, not Constitution Plaza alone, but the combination. Urban renewal that displaces black families, housing discrimination that concentrates them in specific neighborhoods, and white fear that drives everyone else away. The insurance executives who commissioned the arterial plan did not intend this outcome. They did not set out to destroy Hartford. They believed they were saving it. They believed that highways and modern buildings would make Hartford competitive with the suburbs, would keep the middle class in the city, would generate prosperity for everyone. They were catastrophically wrong. And by the late 1960s, the consequences of their mistake are about to explode. 1967. The Summer of Rage. Across America, black neighborhoods burn. Newark, Detroit, Milwaukee, Minneapolis. Over 150 cities experience what the newspapers call race riots and what the residents call uprisings. Hartford burns too. The immediate trigger varies from city to city. A traffic stop gone wrong. A rumor of police brutality. An arrest that sparks resistance. But the underlying causes are everywhere the same. Decades of discrimination, poverty, overcrowded housing, underfunded schools, police forces that treat black residents as enemies. The pressure builds until it cannot be contained. In Hartford, the pressure releases in September 1967. The Black Caucus of North End Hartford organizes a march to protest housing conditions and neighborhood segregation. They are met by 250 armored police. The confrontation escalates. Windows break. Fires start. The National Guard is called. For several days, the North End is an occupied territory. April 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated in Memphis. Hartford burns again. The fires spread from the North End into downtown. Summer 1969. Another uprising. More fires. More arrests. More National Guard deployments. The total property damage across the 3 years exceeds $4 million. But the numbers do not capture the true cost. The uprisings confirm the fears of White Hartford. The families who were considering leaving now leave immediately. The businesses that were considering relocating now relocate. The insurance companies that were considering suburban campuses now finalize their plans. The uprisings are a symptom of Hartford's disease. But they accelerate the disease's progress. And through it all, one man holds on. His name is Dominic Latorre. Everyone calls him Nicky. He operates the Connecticut Live Poultry Store on Front Street, or rather, on what used to be Front Street, on a sliver of land that somehow escaped the bulldozers. Nicky Latorre has sold live chickens on Front Street for 56 years. He watched his neighborhood disappear. He watched Constitution Plaza rise around him. He watched his customers scatter to the suburbs and the outer neighborhoods. He will not leave. In 1969, the Travelers Insurance Company offers him $110,000 for his property. It is a fortune. It is more money than Nicky Latorre has ever seen. He refuses. He continues to sell chickens. He continues to open his store every morning, to serve the customers who still find their way to him, to maintain his small defiance against the forces that have erased everything he knew. He refuses through the 1970s as Constitution Plaza's vacancy rates climb. He refuses through the early 1980s as Hartford's population continues to fall. He refuses until March 1983, when Dominic "Nicky" Latorre dies, still in possession of his store, never having surrendered. There is no one to carry on after him. The Connecticut Live Poultry Store closes. The last holdout of Front Street finally falls. The 1970s and 80s are the years of slow realization. The insurance executives who commissioned the arterial plan are retiring now, passing leadership to a new generation. The new generation inherits the highways and the parking lots and the empty streets. They inherit Constitution Plaza, which no one calls a success anymore. They inherit a city that has lost 40,000 residents and is losing more every year. They begin to understand what their predecessors did not. They have created a commuter colony. The phrase is devastating in its accuracy. Hartford is no longer a city where people live. Hartford is a city where people work. The insurance towers fill every morning and empty every evening. The workers drive in from the suburbs, park in the lots, ride the elevators, perform their labor, and leave. They bring nothing to Hartford except their presence during business hours. They take their salaries to the suburbs and spend them there. They pay property taxes in West Hartford and Farmington and Glastonbury. They send their children to suburban schools. They vote in suburban elections. Hartford has become a host organism, supporting parasites who extract value and give nothing back. The parasites do not think of themselves as parasites. They think of themselves as commuters. They think they are making rational choices, good schools for their children, safe neighborhoods for their families, value for their money. They do not see the connection between their choices and Hartford's decline. But the connection is real. Every family that leaves Hartford takes tax revenue with it. Every dollar spent in a suburban mall is a dollar not spent in downtown Hartford. Every child enrolled in a suburban school is a child not enrolled in Hartford public schools. The suburban towns grow wealthy. Hartford grows poor. The per capita income of the greater Hartford metropolitan area is among the highest in America. The per capita income of Hartford itself is among the lowest. The wealth is there. It simply does not live within the city limits. West Hartford, directly adjacent to Hartford, you can stand on one side of a street and be in one of America's wealthiest communities, and walk across the street and be in one of America's poorest. The boundary is invisible but absolute. Connecticut General moves to Bloomfield, the insurance company that helped commission the arterial plan, that helped design the highways and the urban renewal, relocates to a suburban campus. The executives can now drive from their homes to their offices without ever entering Hartford. The department stores close. Brown Thompson, a Hartford institution since 1875, shutters. G. Fox and Company, the largest privately owned department store in the nation, shuts down in 1993. Sage Allen, another Hartford landmark, closes. Why have downtown department stores when suburban malls have free parking? West Farms Mall opens in 1974, on the border between West Hartford and Farmington. Buckland Hills Mall opens in 1990 in Manchester. The suburban malls have everything the downtown stores had, plus parking, plus safety, plus the comfort of shopping among people who look like you. The downtown dies, the storefronts go dark, the sidewalks empty. The city that Mark Twain called the chief of beautiful towns becomes a place you avoid after dark. 1997. The Hartford Whalers announce they are leaving. The Whalers are Hartford's NHL hockey team, the city's only major professional sports franchise. They play at the Hartford Civic Center, a venue that opened in 1975 and collapsed in 1978 when the roof gave way under a snow load. The roof was rebuilt. The team stayed. But attendance is declining. The arena is too small. The luxury boxes are insufficient. The Whalers owner wants a new facility, and Hartford's struggling. With poverty, losing population, desperate for anything that might reverse the decline, cannot provide one. The city tries. There are proposals, negotiations, last-minute offers. But the Whalers are gone. They move to Raleigh, North Carolina, and become the Carolina Hurricanes. The loss is symbolic more than economic. Professional sports do not revitalize cities. But the departure of the Whalers is an admission. Hartford cannot compete. Hartford cannot attract. Hartford cannot hold on to what it has. 1990 to 2000. The decade of collapse. Hartford loses 13% of its population in 10 years. 13%. Nearly 20,000 people. More than New London, New Haven, Groton, and Bridgeport lose combined. The city that peaked at 177,000 residents in 1950 has fallen to 121,000. 56,000 people gone. A third of the city vanished. And those who remain are poorer than ever. 2000. Hartford is the second poorest major city in America, measured by the percentage of families living below the poverty line. 28% of Hartford families are officially poor. This is the harvest of the arterial plan. This is the fruit of urban renewal. This is what the insurance executives built when they demolished Front Street and severed the city from its river and carved highways through poor neighborhoods. They wanted to save Hartford from blight. They wanted to modernize the city. They wanted to compete with the suburbs. They destroyed what they were trying to save. And now, in the first years of the 21st century, Hartford is not a city anymore. Hartford is a ruin inhabited by the people who could not escape, surrounded by suburbs that have captured all the wealth that Hartford once possessed. The golden age is over. The age of decline has become the new normal. The question now is not how to revive Hartford. The question is whether Hartford can survive at all. There was no Jane Jacobs in Hartford. In New York, in the 1960s, when Robert Moses tried to build a highway through Greenwich Village, a woman named Jane Jacobs organized the resistance. She was a writer, a mother, a resident of the neighborhood Moses wanted to destroy. She had no formal training in urban planning. She had no political power. She had only her eyes, her pen, and her conviction that the experts were wrong. Jacobs understood what Moses did not. Neighborhoods are not collections of buildings. Neighborhoods are ecosystems. The corner store and the playground and the stoop where neighbors gather, these are not blight to be cleared. These are the living tissue of community. Destroy them, and you do not get a better neighborhood. You get no neighborhood at all. Jacobs wrote a book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. She argued that the urban renewal experts had everything backward. Density was good, not bad. Mixed uses were good, not bad. Old buildings were good, not bad. The messy, chaotic, unplanned city was more alive, more safe, more prosperous than the orderly city of the planner's dreams. She fought Moses. She organized her neighbors. She went to city council meetings and zoning hearings and public forums. She made noise. And she won. Greenwich Village was not destroyed. Lower Manhattan was not carved up by expressways. The organic fabric of the city was preserved. Hartford had no Jane Jacobs. Hartford had the bishops, the insurance executives, the bankers, the men who ran the city. They believed in progress. They believed in expertise. They believed that modern planning could solve urban problems. No one with power said no. The Italian families of Front Street had no advocate. The black families of the North End had no advocate. The residents of the neighborhoods carved up by Interstate 84 had no advocate. They had grievances. They had anger. They had, eventually, riots. But they did not have organization. They did not have a voice that the powerful would hear. And so Hartford was remade according to the planner's vision. The highways were built. The neighborhoods were destroyed. The river was walled off. The future arrived, and it looked nothing like the planners had promised. Jane Jacobs understood something that the Hartford planners never grasped. You cannot design community. Community grows organically, over time, through thousands of small interactions between people who share space. It requires density and diversity and the freedom to be messy. The planners wanted order. They got emptiness. They wanted efficiency. They got death. They wanted to save their city. They killed it instead. Walk through downtown Hartford on a Tuesday afternoon in the year 2024. Start at the old State House, the federal-style building where the Connecticut General Assembly once met, where the Amistad captives were tried, where 2 centuries of history have accumulated in brick and mortar. The building is a museum now. Tourists visit occasionally. School groups file through on field trips. The docents tell stories about the founding of Connecticut, about the charter hidden in an oak tree, about the colonial era when Hartford was a center of power. They do not mention what happened after. Walk south on Main Street. Count the storefronts. Count the ones that are occupied and the ones that are empty. Count the ones that have been empty so long the for lease signs have faded to illegibility. A few restaurants cater to the lunch crowd. A few shops sell convenience items to office workers. A Dunkin' Donuts. A Subway. The kinds of businesses that survive on foot traffic that exists only between the hours of 11 and 2. By 6 in the evening, these businesses are closed. Their owners have learned there is no point staying open. There are no customers after dark. Walk east toward the river. You cannot see it yet. You cannot hear it. The Connecticut River is half a mile away, but it might as well be on another continent. Between you and the water stands Interstate 91, 6 lanes of highway carrying 40,000 vehicles a day, a concrete wall that blocks sight and sound and any sense that Hartford was once a river city. To reach the water, you must cross the highway. There are pedestrian bridges, built decades after the interstate, grudging acknowledgements that perhaps people might want to walk to the river that made their city possible. The bridges are functional. They are not inviting. They say, "This is not a place for people. This is a place for cars. You are trespassing. Cross the bridge anyway. Descend to Riverside Park. Stand on the bank of the Connecticut River and look back at Hartford." The insurance towers rise against the sky. The gold dome of the Capitol catches the afternoon sun. Constitution Plaza spreads its granite surfaces toward the water, stopping abruptly at the highway. This is one of the great rivers of New England. It flows 390 miles from the Canadian border to Long Island Sound. It powered mills. It carried cargo. It made Hartford possible. And Hartford turned its back. For 40 years, an organization called Riverfront Recapture has been trying to undo this mistake. Volunteers plant trees. Activists lobby for pedestrian improvements. Landscape architects design promenades and overlooks. Slowly, painfully, one grant application at a time, they are trying to reconnect Hartford to its river. 40 years of work to undo what took 10 years to destroy. They have made progress. There are parks now where there were once parking lots. There are walking paths along the water. There is a platform built over a section of Interstate 91, a small green space that pretends the highway beneath it does not exist. But the highway does exist. The roar of traffic is constant. The exhaust drifts upward. And when the volunteers go home, when the joggers finish their runs, when the sun sets and darkness falls, Riverside Park empties like everywhere else in Hartford. The river flows on, indifferent to the city that abandoned it. The zombie phase begins in the 1980s and continues to the present day. A zombie is a creature that appears to be alive but is not. It walks and moves and performs the functions of the living, but it lacks the vital spark that separates life from death. It is an imitation of existence, not existence itself. Hartford, in the zombie phase, is a city that still functions. The insurance companies still occupy their towers. The state government still operates from the Capitol. Workers still commute in every morning and commute out every evening. The machinery of commerce continues to turn. But the vital spark is gone. The neighborhoods that made Hartford a city, the front streets and the nook farms, the places where people lived and raised families and built communities, these are memories now. What remains is an economic machine, a place where labor is performed and capital is accumulated, surrounded by a ring of poverty that serves the machine but receives nothing in return. The leaders of Hartford understand this. They have understood it for decades. And they have tried, repeatedly, desperately, to revive their city. The formula is always the same. Build something. Build something big, something visible, something that will attract attention and investment and people. A stadium, a convention center, a mall, a casino. The something varies, but the theory does not. If you build it, they will come. 1974. The Hartford Civic Center opens. It is a multi-purpose arena, home to the Hartford Whalers, host to concerts and conventions and college basketball games. It is supposed to anchor downtown to give people a reason to visit Hartford after dark. 1978. The roof collapses. A heavy snow load overwhelms the structure. The arena is empty when the roof falls. The Whalers are on the road, playing in another city. No one dies. But the symbolism is hard to ignore. They rebuild the roof. They reopen the arena. The Whalers play there for another 2 decades before fleeing to North Carolina. The Civic Center still stands. They call it the XL Center now, named for a sponsor. It hosts concerts and college hockey games. It does not anchor downtown. It does not give people a reason to visit Hartford after dark. 2005. The Connecticut Convention Center opens. It is a massive facility on the riverfront, designed to attract business travelers and trade shows. The theory: conventioneers will fill hotels, eat at restaurants, spend money in downtown Hartford. The convention center operates. Trade shows come and go. But the conventioneers do not linger. They attend their sessions, return to their hotels, and leave as soon as their obligations permit. They do not explore Hartford. There is nothing to explore. 2017. Dunkin' Donuts Park opens. This is the latest attempt, the newest hope. A minor league baseball stadium for the Hartford Yard Goats, a AA affiliate of the Colorado Rockies. The stadium sits at the edge of downtown, on the border between the insurance district and the North End. It is supposed to bridge the divide. The theory is familiar. Baseball will bring people downtown. People will discover the restaurants and shops nearby. Development will follow. The neighborhood north of downtown, they call it Dono Now. Downtown North, a real estate branding exercise, will fill with apartments and retail and life. The stadium was supposed to cost $60 million. It cost $71 million. It was supposed to open in 2016. It opened a year late, after construction delays and contractor disputes and cost overruns that would be comic if they were not so predictable. But it opened, and people came. On summer evenings, 6,000 fans fill the seats. They watch baseball, they eat hot dogs, they drink beer. They have a pleasant time in a pleasant stadium in a city that desperately needs pleasant things. And then they get in their cars and drive home to the suburbs. The stadium has not transformed Hartford. Some development has occurred in Dono. Apartment buildings have risen. A supermarket has opened. But the parking lots remain. The highway remains. The fundamental structure of Hartford, a commuter colony surrounded by poverty, remains. You cannot build your way out of a planning mistake. You cannot construct a stadium or a convention center or an arena and expect it to undo decades of highway construction and neighborhood destruction and suburban flight. The damage is structural. The damage is in the bones. Hartford keeps trying anyway. There is a plan called Hartford 400, timed to the city's 400th anniversary in 2035. The plan proposes to remove highway interchanges, to free 150 acres of land for development, to reconnect neighborhoods severed by the interstates. The cost estimate is $17 billion. The timeline is 15 years. The political will is uncertain. Even if the plan succeeds, even if Hartford finds $17 billion and 15 years of commitment, the highways will remain. The interchanges may be modified, but Interstate 84 and Interstate 91 will continue to carry traffic through the city. The wall between Hartford and its river will still stand. You can ameliorate the damage, you cannot undo it. The concrete is poured. The neighborhoods are gone. The people have left and are not coming back. 1988. A company called Colonial Realty borrows $94 million to purchase Constitution Plaza from Travelers Insurance. The appraisers value Constitution Plaza at $133 million. The investment seems sound. Office space in downtown Hartford, anchored by major insurance companies, generating steady rental income. What could go wrong? December 1992. GE Capital forecloses on Colonial Realty. The company has collapsed in a fraud scandal, its executives eventually sentenced to prison. Constitution Plaza, the gleaming symbol of urban renewal, the replacement for the neighborhood called Little Italy, is now distressed property. The assessors revise their opinion. Constitution Plaza is no longer considered prime or Class A office space. The buildings that seemed so modern in 1964 are dated now, their systems obsolete, their designs unfashionable. The plaza that was supposed to revitalize Hartford has become a symbol of Hartford's decline. Walk through Constitution Plaza today. The Phoenix building still stands, its green glass ellipse still balanced on its narrow base. The granite plaza still spreads between the towers. The fountains still run in season. But the buildings are not full. The vacancy rates have climbed for decades. Some floors sit empty, their windows dark, their space unmarketable. The tenants who remain are government agencies and non-profits, organizations that cannot afford better space or do not need it. Once a year, Constitution Plaza comes alive. In December, they string lights through the trees and across the buildings. They call it the Winterfest. Families drive in from the suburbs to see the display, to walk among the lights, to feel, for a few weeks, like Hartford is a real city. Then January comes. The lights come down. The crowds disappear. Constitution Plaza returns to its usual state. A corporate campus for commuters, empty after 5, quiet on weekends, a monument to a vision of urban life that never materialized. The Colt Armory still stands. The Blue Onion Dome, crowned with its golden rampant colt, still rises over the South Meadows. For 140 years, this silhouette defined Hartford. It appeared on postcards and letterheads, a symbol of manufacturing might, a declaration that Hartford made things. The factory closed in 1994. Colt had struggled for decades. The company that perfected the American system of manufacturing, that armed the Union in the Civil War and the Army in both World Wars, could not compete with foreign manufacturers and changing markets. The workforce shrank. The product lines narrowed. The end came quietly, with a press release and a final paycheck. The building has been designated a National Historic Landmark. It is being converted to apartments. The workers who once made revolvers by the thousand will be replaced by residents who commute to insurance offices. There is something appropriate about this. Hartford began as an insurance town, became a manufacturing town, and has returned to insurance. The Colt Armory, symbol of Hartford's industrial age, will house the employees of Hartford's post-industrial age, if anyone wants to live there. The South Meadows, where Samuel Colt built his dike and planted his willows and created his factory town, is not an attractive residential neighborhood. It floods. It always flooded. Colt's dike held back the river for a while, but the river is patient, and the dike requires maintenance, and the will to maintain it has faded along with the industry it protected. The neighborhood is poor. The houses are modest. The commercial strips are marginal. This is not West Hartford. This is not where the insurance executives live. But it is Hartford. It is what remains of Hartford after the highways and the urban renewal and the suburban flight. It is the city that the planners made, whether they intended to or not. There is a way to understand what happened to Hartford. There is a comparison that illuminates the tragedy. 1960. Hartford and Cambridge, Massachusetts, are similar cities. Both are relatively prosperous but declining New England cities. Both have populations around 120,000. Both are dominated by large institutions, insurance in Hartford, universities in Cambridge. Both face the pressures of suburban growth and urban renewal. From this common starting point, the two cities make different choices. Cambridge does not build highways through its neighborhoods. Cambridge does not demolish its housing stock for corporate plazas. Cambridge does not sever itself from its river, the Charles, but instead maintains and enhances the connection. Cambridge invests in public transit. Cambridge preserves its density. Cambridge keeps its streets walkable and its neighborhoods mixed. 2020. Cambridge has grown. Its population has climbed from 120,000 to 118,000, essentially stable, with fluctuations. But stability is not the measure of Cambridge's success. 25% of Cambridge commuters walk or bicycle to work. The density supports small businesses. The neighborhoods retain their character. Harvard and MIT generate innovation that spills into the surrounding streets. Cambridge is one of the most desirable places to live in America. Hartford has collapsed. Its population has fallen from 177,000 to 120,000, a loss of 1/3. 6% of Hartford commuters walk or bicycle to work. The small businesses have closed. The neighborhoods have emptied. The insurance companies remain, but they generate nothing that spills into the surrounding streets. Hartford is one of the poorest places in America. Same starting point. Different choices. Opposite outcomes. This comparison is not entirely fair. Cambridge had Harvard and MIT, institutions that generate talent and attract investment in ways that insurance companies do not. Cambridge was closer to Boston, more integrated into a thriving metropolitan economy. Cambridge had advantages Hartford lacked. But Cambridge also made choices Hartford did not make. Cambridge said no to highways. Cambridge said no to urban renewal. Cambridge preserved what Hartford destroyed. There was no Jane Jacobs in Hartford. There was no one who stood up and said, "This is wrong. This will not save our city. This will kill it." Or rather, there were people who said this. The Italian families of Front Street, the black families of the North End, the residents of the neighborhoods carved up by the interstates. They said no. They protested. They rioted. No one with power listened. The moral of Hartford is not complicated. The moral is simple, so simple that it should have been obvious, so simple that the leaders of Hartford should have seen it before they broke ground on Constitution Plaza or poured the first yard of concrete for Interstate 91. Cities are not machines. Cities are organisms. A machine can be redesigned. You can take it apart, replace the components, put it back together in a different configuration. A machine does not care about its history. A machine has no memory. An organism is different. An organism grows. An organism develops relationships between its parts. An organism cannot be disassembled and reassembled without killing it. Hartford was an organism. Its neighborhoods were organs. Its streets were arteries. Its people were cells, constantly dying and being replaced, but maintaining the overall structure through generations of change. The planners looked at Hartford and saw a machine. They saw components that could be replaced with better components. They saw inefficiencies that could be optimized. They saw a system that could be redesigned from first principles. They were wrong. When they demolished Front Street, they did not simply remove buildings. They severed relationships. They scattered communities. They broke the connections that made the neighborhood function. When they built the highways, they did not simply add transportation infrastructure. They cut the city into pieces. They isolated neighborhoods from each other. They destroyed the circulation that kept the organism alive. When they walled off the river, they did not simply create a barrier. They amputated Hartford from the source of its identity, the reason it existed, the water that had sustained it for 300 years. An organism can survive some damage. An organism can heal. But there are wounds that cannot heal, damage that is too severe, amputations that remove too much. Hartford sustained too much damage. The organism died. What remains is not Hartford. What remains is a corpse that continues to move, a zombie city that performs the functions of urban life without possessing urban life. The buildings stand. The workers commute. The machinery of commerce continues to turn. But the vital spark is gone. The neighborhoods are gone. The communities are gone. The life that made Hartford a city is gone. The insurance executives who destroyed Hartford were not evil men. This is important to understand. This is essential to the tragedy. They were not corrupt. They were not stupid. They were not motivated by malice or greed or contempt for the people whose neighborhoods they demolished. They were believers. They believed in progress. They believed in expertise. They believed that modern planning could solve the problems of the modern city. They believed that highways and urban renewal and slum clearance would make Hartford better, would revitalize downtown, would compete with the suburbs, would create prosperity for everyone. They believed they were saving Hartford. They were the most successful businessmen in America. They ran the most profitable industry in the nation. They had built their fortunes on one principle: keeping their promises. They stayed solvent. They paid claims. They honored their commitments when other companies failed. The same men who kept their promises to policyholders broke their promise to their city. Not intentionally, not knowingly, but completely. They looked at Hartford and saw blight where there was community. They saw inefficiency where there was life. They saw problems where there were only the ordinary complications of human existence. They thought they knew better. They thought their expertise, their actuarial tables, their traffic studies, their architectural renderings, gave them insight that ordinary residents lacked. They thought the future they envisioned was better than the present they inhabited. They were catastrophically wrong. And by the time they understood their mistake, it was too late. The concrete was poured. The neighborhoods were demolished. The people had fled. You cannot unring a bell. You cannot unbuild a highway. You cannot bring back the families you displaced or the communities you destroyed or the life you extinguished. You can only live with what you have made. Stand on the corner of Main Street and State Street in downtown Hartford. Look around. The old State House is behind you, a museum of colonial history. The Traveller's Tower rises to your left, one of Hartford's signature skyscrapers, built in 1919 when the city was still confident in its future. Constitution Plaza spreads to your right, granite and glass and empty space. The streets are quiet. It is after 5 o'clock. The workers have gone home to West Hartford, to Farmington, to Glastonbury, to all the places that are not Hartford. A few pedestrians pass. A bus rumbles by, nearly empty. The traffic on I-84 roars in the distance, a constant reminder of what Hartford chose to become. Look up. The sky is visible between the buildings, a narrow strip of blue or grey depending on the weather. The towers are not tall enough to block the light, not close enough together to create the canyon effect of a real urban downtown. There is too much space here, too much emptiness, too much room for a city that lost a third of its population. Look down. The sidewalks are clean. The city maintains them, but they are designed for crowds that no longer exist. They are wide enough for thousands of pedestrians, and a few, dozen walk them now. This is Hartford. This is what remains. The insurance companies survive. They have merged and acquired and restructured, but they remain. Aetna, the Hartford, Travelers. The names are still here, even if the headquarters have moved to the suburbs. The state government survives. The gold dome of the Capitol still gleams. The legislators still meet. The bureaucracy still functions. Connecticut still needs a capital, and Hartford is still it. The people survive. 120,000 of them, poor and struggling and trapped in a city that was not designed for them. They live in the neighborhoods the planners forgot, the places that were too insignificant to demolish, the margins of the machine. They are Hartford now. Not the commuters, not the insurance executives, not the suburban families who drive through on their way to somewhere else. The people who remain are Hartford. And they did not choose this. They did not vote for the highways or the urban renewal, or the demolition of their neighborhoods. They were not consulted. They were not considered. They were acted upon by men who believed they knew better, who believed they were doing good, who believed the future would vindicate their choices. The future did not vindicate them. The future condemned them. And the people left behind are serving the sentence. Mark Twain left Hartford in 1891. He was fleeing bankruptcy, escaping the creditors who pursued him after his investments failed. He never returned to live. But before he left, before the bad investments and the failed typesetting machine and the exile that took him around the world, he wrote about the city he loved. Of all the beautiful towns it has been my fortune to see, this is the chief. You do not know what beauty is if you have not been here. Twain saw a Hartford that no longer exists. He saw the Nook Farm neighborhood, where writers and reformers gathered in Victorian mansions to argue about literature and politics. He saw the tree-lined streets and the prosperous shops and the Connecticut River flowing past a city that embraced it. He did not see the highways. He did not see Constitution Plaza. He did not see the wall between downtown and the water. He did not see the future Hartford would choose. His house still stands on Farmington Avenue. It is a museum now, carefully restored, open to tourists who pay admission to see where Huckleberry Finn was written. The guides explain Twain's love for Hartford. They show visitors the billiard room where the Friday evening club met. They describe the interiors Louis Comfort Tiffany designed. They do not explain why Twain's Hartford disappeared. They do not connect the beautiful town of 1876 to the struggling city of today. The museum is a bubble, a preserved fragment of a past that has no connection to the present. And perhaps that is appropriate. Perhaps Hartford should be a museum, a monument to a city that committed suicide, a warning to other cities tempted by the same choices. Build highways through your neighborhoods. Watch your people flee. Demolish your communities for corporate plazas. Watch your downtown die. Wall yourself off from your river. Forget why you exist. Hartford did all of these things. Hartford made all of these choices. Hartford believed it was building the future. Hartford built its own tomb. The final image. Aerial view of Hartford at sunset. The Connecticut River catches the last light of day, golden and beautiful, flowing south toward Long Island Sound. The city spreads along the western bank, the insurance towers, the Capitol Dome, the grid of streets, the parking lots, the highways. The interchange of Interstate 84 and Interstate 91 dominates the frame. Concrete ribbons arc and curve and spiral, carrying vehicles from one road to another. The scale is immense. The interchange covers more ground than the downtown it was built to serve. The river flows past, barely, visible beyond the highways. Sound barriers line the interstate, blocking the view, blocking the noise, blocking any connection between Hartford and the water that made it possible. The insurance towers are half empty. The lights in the windows are sparse. A few night workers, a few cleaning crews, nothing more. The parking lots are empty. Acres of asphalt that held thousands of cars this morning and will hold thousands again tomorrow and are holding nothing now. Pull back. The suburbs spread in every direction. West Hartford, Farmington, Glastonbury, Wethersfield. The houses with yards. The shopping centres with parking lots. The schools with green fields. This is where Hartford's people live now. This is where Hartford's wealth resides. Pull back further. The metropolitan area is prosperous. The per capita income is among the highest in America. The universities and the hospitals and the corporations generate billions of dollars. The Connecticut River Valley is not a failed region. Only Hartford is failed. Only the city at the center, the city that made the wealth possible, the city that built the insurance industry and armed the Union and attracted America's greatest writers. Only this city is poor and struggling and empty. The wealth flows around Hartford, but not through it. The prosperity touches Hartford, but does not lift it. The region thrives while the city dies. This is the final image. This is the legacy of the men who thought they could redesign a city. This is what remains of the chief of beautiful towns. The river flows on. It has flowed for 10,000 years since the glaciers retreated and the valley took its present shape. It will flow for 10,000 more. The river does not care about Hartford. The river does not care about the highways or the urban renewal or the choices made by men who believed they knew better. The river simply flows. And Hartford, what is left of Hartford, what remains after the planners finish their work, Hartford simply endures. Not thriving, not dying, simply existing, a zombie city, a corpse that moves, a monument to the seduction of progress and the arrogance of expertise. They called it urban renewal. It was urban suicide. And the city that committed it is still here, still standing, still waiting for someone to find a way to bring it back to life. The sun sets, the towers go dark, the highways carry their endless traffic, and the river flows on.